first generation Red Sea return pump was based on the CJ-SDC line of return pumps that had a reputation for two things: solid reliability backed by a 5-year warranty and an annoying low humming sound. The new Gen 2 return pump though is no longer based on the CJ unit, and Red Sea claims it's silent, more efficient, and has smart features that integrate it into the Red Sea ReefBeat system. I've been running it for 2 months now, so today I'll tell you which of those goals it's achieved and which it hasn't. Before I get into that though, there is of course the usual disclosure. Red Sea gave me this return pump for free and I get to keep it after I made the review. No money changed hands, Red Sea don't get any input into the video, and they don't get to see it before you do, and of course I am always free to say whatever I want, both good and bad. Alright, with all that being said then, let's get stuck in. Now I've already covered the basic specs, prices and so on in my unboxing video, so this video will focus on how the return pump works in practice. Install was pretty easy and I chose to use soft plumbing fittings, partly because it's easier to do so, and partly because using a silicone hose like this will reduce any vibrations, which will help reduce noise. But it also comes with hard plumbing fittings that can accept both US and metric sizes, being 32mm and 40mm, and 1.25" and 1.5". I have the 12,000 litre per hour version, and it replaced my 10,000 litre per hour refactory return pump that was running at 55% power. Given the Red Sea pump has a slightly higher output rating, I worked out that it should achieve the same output as my old pump, running at 45% power. But I was pleasantly surprised to find that it ran much lower than that, and in order to get roughly the same output as before, I had to dial it right back to 30%. I tested the power consumption of both pumps, and the refactory was drawing about 53 watts, whereas the Red Sea only draws around 46 watts. And for what it's worth, I worked out that that will save me around £25 a year in electricity. Not exactly life-changing money, but that is very impressive given the refactory, which is based on a Jecod return pump, is already quite an efficient pump. And the equivalent 12,000 litre per hour return pump from Ecotech, the Vectra L2, is rated at 150 watts against the Red Sea's 105 watts. Now I haven't tested the consumption of the Ecotech one of course, but on paper at least, that is quite a big win for the Red Sea. It also means that you can probably downsize the pump you choose, and if I were to start again, I would have gone for the 8,000 litre per hour version instead of the 12,000, which I think is overkill for this 6x2x2 tank. Now in the unboxing video, I mentioned the inlet guard that allows the pump to draw water from the bottom half of the pump only, and I wasn't sure there was much point in that, but in practice that actually means that it can sit in shallower water of course, which gives you more flexibility in terms of the install, and I like that I can keep it running a little longer while I'm siphoning out water during a water change before I have to turn the return pump off. Now you can simply run the return pump on its own by using the inline controller that adjusts output in 20% increments. If you do that, it's pretty cheap, and my 12,000 litre per hour unit costs £270, which compares very favourably to the equivalent Ecotech Vectra, which comes in at £534, including the barb and screen kit. However, that's not a direct comparison, and while the Red Sea will run as a standalone pump, to get access to the Red Sea ReefBeat app, you need to buy the dual controller, which is £165, taking the total cost up to £435. That's still £100 cheaper than the Ecotech, but no longer a cheap option, and I actually think most people will want to buy the dual controller. Although it is worth noting that you can run 2 pumps off a dual controller, which means you can run twin Red Sea return pumps with one controller, or more likely, you can run your Red Sea skimmer and your Red Sea return pump off a single controller. The app allows you to set the output in 1% increments instead of the 20% increments the inline controller allows, so it gives you much finer control over the water circulation through your system. And it will also talk to your other Red Sea equipment via the quick action settings, which include a feed mode, an emergency stop mode, and a maintenance mode. So for example, I can set it to turn off my return pump, filter roller and auto top off when I press the maintenance button, which is really handy for water changes. And if you have a Red Sea skimmer and Red Sea powerheads, you can set it to turn those off too, all at the same time. And you can also set the order in which things turn off and on, so you can set your skimmer to turn off before your return pump does, which will mean it won't overflow when the return pump goes off and the water level in your sump rises. And you can set the skimmer to turn back on after the return pump goes back on, so the sump water level is back to normal before the skimmer starts up again. And if you want to, you can even set the return pump to run at a low intensity, say 5%, instead of turning it off completely. Now with feed mode, everything turns back on after a fixed period of time, and you can choose how long feed mode operates, from anywhere between 5 minutes and 200 minutes. Whereas as far as I can make out, you need to turn the maintenance mode off again manually when you've finished, and it won't turn everything back on automatically. However, I need to say at this point that there are endless combinations of equipment in the ReefBeat ecosystem, and I don't have all of Red Sea's stuff, so I can't tell you how it interacts completely with all the other Red Sea kit. And some of the equipment I have appears in the maintenance mode menu, but not in the feed mode menu, so it might be that the functionality varies between the quick action modes, which is slightly irritating because the things I want to turn off during a water change can only be set in the maintenance mode, not the feed mode, which means I have to remember to turn the maintenance mode off when I finish the water change. Although it is possible that you actually can do that, and I just haven't figured out how to do so yet. But ultimately, it's a cool system with some really useful features, and I'd recommend reading the online instruction manual that tells you everything about the system. So then, the app has some really useful features. The pump is very efficient in terms of electricity consumption, but is it silent? Well, it's definitely quiet and a huge improvement over the Gen 1 pump, but I wouldn't describe it as silent, and it does make a little bit more noise than my previous return pump, which was more or less silent. My litmus test for noisy tank equipment though is my wife, and if I ever install something that makes too much noise, she will tell me straight away. And she hasn't said anything about this pump, so it must be pretty acceptable, and I have found that it's got a bit quieter in the couple of months I've had it running, and it's now at the point where it's quiet enough for me personally. I can't give you a full idea though, and my unit is only set to 30%, so it might make more noise at higher intensities, but also I have the largest pump in the lineup, so it might be that the smaller ones are actually quieter. And if you have a Gen 2 return pump, share your thoughts on the sound levels in the comment section below. And just to wrap this section up, I've made a comparison clip with all of the equipment except the return pump turned off, and the only thing I'll say here is that it's really difficult to accurately reproduce noise levels on YouTube, so please take this clip with a large pinch of salt. So with all of that being said then, who is the G2 ReefRun pump for? Well, if you just want a standalone return pump, and as long as you don't mind missing out on the app integration features, it's hard to beat the Jekods. They're cheap, simple, ultra quiet, and have a really good reputation for reliability. Where the ReefRun makes sense though is if you've already bought into the Red Sea ReefBeat ecosystem, or if you want to set your tank up so everything is on one app. And I really do love that I can turn all of my equipment off with a touch of a single button, particularly during water changes. And if you're thinking of upgrading from the Gen 1 to the Gen 2 ReefRun, I don't think you'll be disappointed. The only thing not to like between the two is that you lose the 5-year warranty that came with the Seache based Gen 1, and the Gen 2 now comes with a 1-year warranty, which is the same as brands like Ecotech. For me personally, that's a price worth paying for how much quieter it is than the Gen 1, but if you want a return pump with a 5-year warranty, you'll need to look elsewhere. And finally, whilst I'm calling this a long-term review, I've only been using the pump for 2 months, so calling it long-term is a bit of a stretch, and of course I can't tell you what actual long-term reliability is like. But if I do have any issues, I'll leave a pinned comment below with details, and if you watch this video in a few months' time, ask me how I'm getting on in the comments, and I'll give you an update. Now if I've missed anything, or if you've got any questions, let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe for next time, and until then, happy reefing.